Deep dives into heroes' lives. Together we'll see who dies and survives. Circled around the sacred fire, strumming along with our favorite lyre. Adventure called a quest awaits. Your destiny's in the hands of the fates. But never fear, we're all friends here. We'll have your back when danger's near. Come with us through the pages as we unravel a tale for the ages into the Percy-Verse.
Hello and welcome to the Percy-Verse Podcast. I'm Alisa.
And I'm Anna. So grab your ballpoint pens and peanut butter ketchup sandwiches because today we're discussing The Lightning Thief, Chapter 1. I accidentally vaporize my pre-algebra teacher. Which my first note is best first chapter title of any book ever. Hard stop.
Oh, yes.
Hard stop.
Yeah. Bar none.
Yeah.
It's a truly incredible chapter 1 chapter title.
Inspired.
Just starts off with a bang, and also like I feel like you immediately get the sense of humor and the kind of tone, the vibe of Percy, of the book as a whole, from just that being chapter 1.
100%. Like he didn't need to write anything else. That's it.
No.
The rest of it is just, not important. Since this is the first episode, I did want to explain what we're doing here and give a little shout out to the inspiration. So we are here with the Percy-Verse Podcast, and we are going to be reading the Percy Jackson books one chapter at a time, one episode at a time, discussing, sharing thoughts, humor, giggles, hopefully finding inside jokes and little secrets tucked into the book, patterns. And this idea came about because I was listening to the Super Carlin Brothers podcast through the Gryffindor, who I want to give a shout out to. They're reading the Harry Potter books one chapter at a time. Woo-woo. And, we always felt, I think you and I, that there was a severe lack of Percy Jackson content out there on the internet.
Yes.
Fan content, etc. Yeah. People are making amazing art. People are making amazing things. But, I don't know.
Absolutely.
Where's the YouTubers? Where's the podcast? Where's the things? Anyway, so we decided that we were going to take it on ourselves and go through the Percy Jackson books one chapter at a time, which we love from our childhood, have read a million times, and are very excited to share with you all.
Yes. This remains to this day my personal favorite book series. I was, let me see if I can do really quick math in my head. I would have been 8 when these first came out. So I was, the perfect age.
You were the target audience.
To just become obsessed, and I absolutely did. So these books have a very special place in my heart. I love them very dearly, and I'm very excited to embark on this journey and to be reading them with my sister and just the two of us talking about them.
We're gonna have a good time. So hopefully anyone listening loves Percy Jackson as much as we do, and or this is your first time through the books, which congratulations, it's going to be a fun ride. And also this will be a spoilery podcast. We will talk about things that happen in the future. Fair warning. But I think that's the way that we can get the most out of just really thinking about the content, how it all connects. Fun future thing, though. If we can get through this series and the sequel series, and we'll be like 50 at that point, we will enter books I have not read. And I think I'm planning on not reading them for that purpose. So we'll get to a place where instead of both of us having read the books a bunch of times, Alisa will have read them and I will not have read them. And I think that will be a really fun time. So I'm going to try to avoid spoilers as much as possible for future series.
Yes, and I will, so for everyone knows, Anna has read Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the Heroes of Olympus, but not anything else, so not Trials of Apollo, not Magnus Chase, or the Kane Chronicles, or anything like that. So I will be trying to make sure I don't spoil anything for those, so our spoilers will go through Percy Jackson and the Olympians and the Heroes of Olympus, but not beyond that if we do, go into spoiler territory.
Yes. All right. Shall we dive in?
Right. Let's dive in.
Appropriate for our hero to be diving.
Mm-hmm. So the first thing
Yes.
that stood out to me so much in reading it this time around was the experience of having Percy talk directly to me, the reader,
Totally.
and this little like intro piece that's this kind of warning. And I just noted down how funny it is in like a meta kind of way to have closed this book right now
Yep.
in sentence number 2.
Yep, 100%. I have so many notes on this first little section here. I think it's genius. My first note is the reverse psychology of it all. I also think that specifically for anyone who's neurodivergent and has demand avoidance, like having someone tell you not to do something, I'm like, it's so smart because it's written about neurodiverse people. And then it's like,
you're like, so I will.
Yeah, dang it, I'm going to read
Challenge
the book.
accepted.
Yeah, exactly. Challenge accepted. So I think it's genius. I think it's funny. I also underlined close this book right now. Also, can I say I don't write in my book, so this was a very weird experience, but kind of exhilarating. Like,
me too.
I felt like I was doing something wrong.
Right.
But like, which is fun. It's in the vibe.
Yeah. Yes, my first time really truly annotating a book properly because it feels almost sacrilegious
100%.
to write in a book, but
especially a beloved book.
Yes. But also kind of fun and freeing.
100%. I'm like, I can doodle. I can do anything.
Yeah.
The other thing at the beginning right here, I felt like the third sentence, believe whatever lie your mom or dad told you about your birth and try to lead a normal life. There is something to be said about children's books that make you feel like you are special or you have a secret backstory or secret powers. I remember I read the Face on the Milk Carton series when I was little. And then I was like convinced that I was adopted, even though that makes no sense. Just because it like you want to have some secret, super like interesting backstory as a kid. So I do really like that it's sort of speaking to like all these things that really work when you're a little kid reading a book.
Yep. Well, and then like going on into the, if you're a normal kid reading this because you think it's fiction, great, read on. I envy you for being able to believe that none of this ever happened. Is that's such an interesting, it's such an interesting thing to do in the very intro of a book, to almost like challenge the readers, like, how much do you believe that this is 100% real or not?
Well, and just like the underlying assumption, like this is real. It's like Polar Express style. Like if you don't hear the little bell, you've lost the spirit of Christmas. This is like, this is real. And if you don't believe it, I mean, I guess that's fine, but it's way cooler if you do, you know?
Right. Yes. So then, of course, like I remember being that little and reading these books and being like, I 150,000% believe. I believe. And I remember reading it and being like, I want to get that stirring feeling, as you know, being like, I want to, through this book, discover that I am also a demigod.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, who doesn't want magical powers and terrifying creatures chasing you constantly? It's very appealing.
Yeah,
very. And then it really doubles down. If you recognize yourself in these pages, stop reading immediately. Like he tells you twice on the first page to not read the book.
To not read
it's
the
like
book.
it's both very clever and also kind of brave, because it's like, what if somebody listened to him? You know what I mean?
Right. And then just closed on page 1 and never read any past that.
I don't know if I've read too many other books that do that. And it's a very interesting choice, and I think it's really effective.
Very.
Especially because he could have started, like the next section starts with, my name is Percy Jackson, I'm 12 years old. And the note I wrote there is, it could have started there.
Totally.
But it's so much better this way.
Yes. Well, and what I kind of really took away from this first section right before the kind of what feels like the start to the story of My Name is Percy Jackson is that I feel like it really establishes this feeling of, I am hearing this story directly from Percy. Like he's either, I'm reading his diary or he's telling it to me, or I'm reading the book, you know, that he wrote about this experience. It really feels, I think this first section of his warnings and all of that really really make me as the reader feel like I am hearing directly from Percy Jackson, which I think is really
Yeah,
cool.
it's like an inside look, and you do get a lot of inside looks into how he thinks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's relatable. Like, I was a little older than the target audience. You know, we have a 4.5 year difference, right? So like,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely remember feeling like this was for a little bit younger kids than me, but
Mm-hmm.
also like wanting to be in the world. And there are some kids who are older. And so I think I related to those kids, and I almost then wanted to like
Mm-hmm.
imagine what my backstory of this age would have been like.
Totally. Yeah. And then what really stood out to me in that last paragraph of this kind of almost what feels like introduction
Yeah.
to the chapter, even though it's at the beginning of the chapter, is and once you know that it's only a matter of time before they sense it too, and they'll come for you. Like saying they, having it be this kind of vague but deeply ominous thing that
Totally.
you don't know yet what they is or what they means, but you know that that's scary.
Yeah, it's very intriguing. I was just really thinking about from the perspective, like when you write children's books, you want like little kids books, you want every page to end in like a cliffhanger. And I was thinking about that with this book. Like, this is a perfect first page because it starts with this really intriguing, funny title. It is very like, don't read this book, it's scary, there's a they, like there's these sort of like hints about something that's really ominous but exciting and like all the things. And then it ends on, am I a troubled kid? Yeah, you could say that. And like that makes you want to learn more. And so I felt like
absolutely
thinking about this first page, it's a really great first page for a book that takes you, we're not getting a ton of like content up front, right? Like information about the specific characters of the plot, but we are very drawn in to the mystery of the whole thing. And I think that's very effective.
Absolutely. Well, and what I was just thinking about as you were talking was that it's an interesting way it it's I don't know if this is actually fully accurate to say, but it feels like almost kind of like a slightly non-traditional way of getting a character introduction because we're almost introduced more to his voice and how he views things and how he thinks about the world rather than what is that then kind of more standard one of my name is Percy Jackson, I'm 12 years old.
We're in New York, like we get the basic kind of the rundown in that little sentence.
But I think the thing that, at least for me, really draws me in and I think is so effective about this first page is that you are really getting in his head and you are fully understanding, okay, this is Percy Jackson and his humor and his wit and also his view of the world with this, you know, when he's telling you, if you think you might be a half-blood, close the book right now. I envy you if you know, aren't and can believe that this is fiction. Like, you just so immediately understand, I feel like, how he thinks and is as a character, which I think is a very cool way to meet a character because we're met by being like placed into their mind rather than being kind of like handshake introduced
to who they are. Well, and I think that that's really effective too because you want to like root for the main character and you want to be invested in the main character. I think by the end of this first chapter you're super invested in Percy Jackson as a character. Absolutely. But even at the end of this first page I think you are too, and that's really it's a really good first page, man.
Even with the am I a troubled kid, you could say that. It makes me want to know, what do you mean by troubled? How? You know? What does that entail? What does that mean?
Like,
and it makes
could say that though qualifies it, where it's like,
like
he is, but there's a mystery under it.
And also, to me, almost a sense of him kind of challenging the idea of him being a troubled kid. Like, you could say that, sure, and kind of almost in that, like, like, people have told me that, but do I personally actually believe that I am a troubled kid? I think, at least for me, I read that as like, no, he doesn't really, you know.
Yeah, something I really like about this chapter is, like, he doesn't know yet, but he kind of knows. You know, like, he has a sense that he's not crazy and that things are actually happening. But obviously, it's really hard when you're a kid and everyone's telling you something different to believe your own truth And so like I don't think I had caught onto that theme in the past, but that's something that really stood out to me in this chapter, this read through was like, there's something here about being gaslit by the world. And
literally what I wrote at the very end
me too,
of the chapter
I think it's
was I wrote gaslight gatekeep girl boss.
I wrote 100% gaslighting after helping him. Okay, we skipped ahead. But yes.
We did.
But yes, that's like a theme that he has an inkling that he does know the truth. But it's not I don't know. It's really hard when you're 12 years old and you know something and everyone's telling you you're wrong to believe it.
Yeah.
So I think that just speaks to something deeper.
And I think that's a theme you see throughout this book. And I would also kind of argue like so many of the books that Rick Riordan writes is this theme of children learning how to essentially say, I can trust my intuition. Totally. I can trust what I had a sense about, what I had a feeling about. Totally. And this dynamic of adults aren't telling me the truth or adults are messing up my life as the gods will do in the future.
Or just piecing out and leaving me alone or
Right. And that's what I loved so much about reading them as a kid was feeling that sense of empowerment from those books and that message of essentially, you know, you are smart enough. Exactly. And that is in this first chapter, it also really stood out to me so much more than I think in any previous reread, how much that feels like such the kind of biggest theme.
Totally. Going to the second page, what I love about the first sentence is how also a young kid this is and like the drama of it all. I could start at any point in my short, miserable life to prove it. Like, so relatable. At that age, everything is terrible all the time and all the bad things happen to me. I mean, honestly, as an adult, sometimes it feels like that too. But it's very like, you know, the little kid drama vibe that I really love.
While also I think it's like relatable as a kid to read. And then you also learn, okay, Percy has been through a lot of
He's
things.
Not
and so then I think, right. And so I think it kind of allows you can relate to it on both fronts, you know, of the way that when you're a kid, everything's at, you know, a 15. And then also that, out of 10. Sorry. No.
I mean, if it's out of 100, out of 10, it's going to make a difference.
Not yet. But then also, you know, if you are a kid who has been through a lot, reading a sentence of "in my short miserable life," you'd be like, yeah,
same, bro.
I completely understand
same, bro. Tell me about it. The only other note I had at the top here is that I feel like Rick Riordan's language around mental health gets better over time and starts out not as great here. And that's just like something that I think I appreciate about him as an author thus far in his journey is that I get the sense that he like takes in feedback and listens and learns over time, given his own, you know, background and identities and stuff. So I appreciate that about him.
Yeah. And it was interesting reading it this time around because there have been, I mean, reading this book since I was 8, I have gone through, you know, I was younger and didn't really pick up on things and then kind of became an adult and reread them and went, oh, there's a lot of language that, you know, I don't really agree with the use of in here. But then it was interesting reading it this time around and I almost kind of, not in a like, yes, we should use this language, but it then felt like this is also probably the reality of what a 12-year-old boy would say, you know, like, and I do think there is something, I don't know, I think there is something in that does feel, and obviously this was written back in the early 2000s. Yeah,
I think it's partly the period too.
But there is something to, I think, like when I was reading it, it landed with me more this time around as, yeah, that is probably what a 12-year-old boy would say to describe his classmates.
I also feel like, though, because they're like at a school for troubled kids or something, and so it landed for me as well as the way that like you would use hyperbole in a self-deprecating way, which was interesting.
Yep.
So I was just like, I'm curious to see, as I'm like reading this more closely than I ever have before, how things come up for me and if it's different or the same. And yeah, I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Another thing I really like is that throughout this chapter, the language that he uses makes the stakes really high, even in the mundane context. So like they're going to a field trip to learn about ancient Greek and Roman stuff, which like I'm like, yeah, I'm so excited. And then he's like, I know it sounds like torture. And I'm like, Percy, but I get it. But anyway, just the use of the word torture there, right? Like I think throughout, I just noticed that there were so many words that was like an extreme, like a really high stakes or like extreme dramatic word, which both fits the little kid thing, but also is like accurate to the reality we're going to step into, which I like.
Yeah. Yes. No, I totally agree with that. So moving on to, I'm realizing I've always pronounced it Mr. Brunner in my brain.
Oh, I think I say Brunner.
And then I realized I don't remember what they say in the TV show, which is probably the correct
We should go find out. Fortunately, he's not Mr. Brunner for too long.
Not for too long. But reading his description, my note was, God, I wanted to be in his class so badly. Reading these books. It was just like, this is my ideal teacher and my ideal class. And I remember reading as a kid and then even as an adult being like, God, I wish I could have had,
teacher like that.
A teacher like that and a class like that. Also, I want to take a second to say there are a few points where the descriptions of the characters are so precise and specific and evocative, and I can both they're both like, I feel like visual and they're sensory in so many ways.
Totally.
Because even the smelled like coffee, like it just I think Rick Riordan does a great job in not very many words, because they're not the most incredibly long descriptions of characters, painting a very specific picture,
he had
both visually
hair and a scruffy beard, a frayed tweed jacket, which always smelled like coffee. Like I totally see what you're saying. And so it's so specific but concise, and it does conjure an image right away. I hadn't like latched onto the coffee thing before. I underlined that because this was the first time I was like, coffee, I love coffee. So I like that part.
And I also think even the not skipping too far ahead to, but when we meet Nancy, like I think, and thinking ahead to other characters, like he just, in a very succinct way, I feel like paints a very clear picture visually, but then also emotionally. Like the adjectives that he uses, you immediately get the sense of, okay, Percy likes this person, or no, Percy does not like this person.
Percy no likey. I feel like I feel like too, I've always felt like he did a good job of making all the characters different, like distinct from each other, and like have really strong traits and personalities and stuff. And I think this goes along with that. Like that first description will be really specific, but then it's super clear, like Percy and Annabeth and Grover and Clarice and like all these people are very different from each other, and they're going to react differently in different situations. And like, I just think he has he has such clarity in writing. It also made me wonder though, because I'm guessing when he was writing this, he wouldn't have been as old as Mr. Brunner man. And so I feel like we'll get it right for next time. You can just use your pronunciation. We'll get it right for next time.
And I can use mine, and then we'll learn for next time.
Okay, we'll look it up, guys. But it made me wonder, because he was a teacher, right? Rick Riordan. It made me wonder if he knew someone like this, or like if he was basing it off of anybody in real life, which would be really cool.
Oh yeah, I've never wondered that, but that would be cool.
Because like, you draw inspiration when you write from people, even if it's
Yeah,
composite or
absolutely.
something. So
Yeah.
but I feel like the way that this chapter moves forward is all basically like in ominous short phrases. So like after we get this nice little description
Yes.
and stuff, it's like, I hope the trip would be okay. Boy, was I wrong. And it's just like everything that moves the story forward is just sort of ominous premonitions about terrible things happening. And I was thinking as I was reading it, like, I'm really glad there is actually a great, satisfying ending to this chapter. And it's the only way it works, because honestly, it gets built up so much that if it wasn't satisfying, you would close the book after this chapter, because what drives you to the end of it is just basically like, something terrible is coming. It's really coming. It's gonna happen. And you're like, what is it? What is it?
No, I know. I think I underlined every single one of those sentences that was that kind of ominous foreboding, it's something coming. Terrible is about to happen. And what I realized when I finished the chapter was that without fail, every time I have read and reread this chapter, I get so engrossed that I forget the chapter title of I Accidentally Vaporized My Pre-Algebra Teacher, which tells you the ominous thing.
True fact.
You don't know exactly how that happens, but that is the ominous thing. But I completely forget that I have that information.
Totally. As good as the chapter title is, you're totally right.
Yes. And so then every time, boy, was I wrong, and all these other sentences that are these kind of building that tension and that suspense of what's the really big, terrible thing that's going to happen. Every time I read it, I'm like, oh God, what is the really big, terrible thing that's going to happen?
As if you don't
And
know.
so I also think that it's so clever and wonderful how you get the answer in the chapter title, but you kind of forget when you're reading it, and you are fully drawn into that suspense and that tension. Yes, totally. And are like, what is going to happen?
Right. And it's even like, he's gonna actually accidentally vaporize his pre-algebra teacher. But you forget.
You don't know that she's a monster, but
I feel like the next one is like this little paragraph, just sort of like dropping little things that have happened to him in the past.
Yes.
Made me want, I don't know, maybe this exists and I don't realize it, but made me want a little vignette book of like Percy's life before this book. And just like all the crazy things that happen, like all of the wild Revolutionary War cannons going off and falling into a shark pool. Excuse. But also like, interesting too, because does he, in that scenario, I guess he doesn't realize, he can breathe underwater. And in that scenario, I guess he doesn't like talk to a shark or anything.
Right.
But I just wonder like how that did go down. So anyway, it just made me want, I was like, give me more. I want to read those stories.
No, absolutely. Because it's so fun. And I every time I read it, I can just picture a Revolutionary War cannon turning and blowing up an empty yellow school bus.
Right.
Just like I can picture all of those things. And while they're all like terrifying examples, the way that Percy tells them is with this, there's almost kind of like humor to it, with I wasn't aiming for the school bus,
but it happened. Well, and like
but it happened.
They took an unplanned swim. Like it's always there's always just a hint of like snark and humor, and I think that's just like what stands out so much to me in the Percy Jackson books, like what makes them feel like a specific book series is this writing style that's always like, he's always just like here with a little bit of snark, a little bit of funny, a little bit of commentary. He's never just telling you a story like A, B, C.
No.
It's probably not going to be in order, first of all. And second of all, like it's going to be with that hint of, humor.
Yes. The other note that I kind of made on this paragraph was it reminded me of the accidents that Harry has in Harry Potter, and just that way of whenever whether it's magic or in this case being a demigod, or what the kind of fun little ways of these characters
like
going through this kind of Yeah, like the accident phase where I don't realize I have powers of some kind, but somehow these crazy things are happening.
Well, and even when I was saying the shark thing, I was thinking about like when Harry meets the boa constrictor and like talks to the snake for the first time, which like doesn't come around till way later. So yeah, I think these little examples are really intriguing if you're reading this for the first time, that you want to know what happens. And then in the Percy Jackson books, there's this extra layer, I feel like, of the monster-ness and all of these additional like external mysterious characters that are really interesting. We haven't gotten to that yet, but like that there's a whole history of also him running into people that kind of freak him out. And like anyway, very interesting mysteries.
Well, and yes, and it's very, I think for me what adds to the experience of rereading them is being I'm like clued in on the secret now, you know, every reread of knowing when he's saying he doesn't understand why these things are happening, or he, you know, thought he saw something strange, like I know, oh, that's the mist, and oh, it's because you're the son of Poseidon. 100%. Like there are all these things that it's so much fun on a reread to be clued in on the secret that he doesn't know, and like have all the information, and it's still just as enjoyable as a read as when I didn't have the information and I was discovering it all
and we'll get to some things in this chapter where you're like, like that's a secret, that's a thing, that's a thing, that's a thing, like, you know, later.
There's so many hints dropped in this chapter.
Well, and it sets up like basically we'll get to it, but it sets up like the whole series in this chapter, which is so cool.
Oh my gosh, I know.
Like the whole series is explained in
which
this
I didn't
chapter.
realize.
I know.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Well, then we get to the description of Nancy Bobofit that you were mentioning.
Yes. Oh, which before that, I do want to say the line, this, which is the start of page 3, this trip I was determined to be good. Is like heartbreaking, and also I feel like is, to me, felt like the first time you get that hint of how much Percy cares and his kind of like his determination, for lack of a better word, where he says I was determined, but that
well, and he's not,
I feel like this is that first
like
time.
I think there's this like confusion of like I end up at these like schools for quote unquote bad kids, but I don't feel like a bad kid, or like I'm not trying to be a bad kid. And you get that in the paragraph about his mom later too, like I was raised by this nice person to be a nice person, I try, and like something always happens and it feels like it's happening to me and I don't know why. So it's like it's very tender there.
It is. So I just wanted to before we get into Nancy,
that's fair,
and all of that, I wanted to, because that, I think it, again, in this reread, there's so many things that are standing out to me so much more than they ever have before. But I think that line hit me in a way emotionally that it hadn't in all the other times I've read it.
No, that's totally fair, and I agree. I agree. Oh, Nancy.
So
you know how. Okay, we're not going to compare every single thing to Harry Potter, I promise. But you know how, like, Umbridge, like, isn't a Death Eater, but, like, she's still terribly evil, spawn of Satan, terrible?
Yes.
There's some characters where you're like, are you not a monster? Like, how are you not a monster? You know what I mean? And I feel like Nancy Bobofit is one of them.
Oh, yes. She very much has the energy of the, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on their name, but the cheerleaders.
Yes.
At the beginning of Sea of Monsters. 100%. I'm blanking on their monster name, but she very much has that energy.
Yep.
I feel like.
Totally.
In terms of a bully
also,
where
like,
you're just like, how are you not an actual Greek monster?
The food throwing in this chapter. Like the number of times, and I know it is a thing kids do in like elementary school and middle school. I think, I get it. But wow, it's like the weapon of choice for 12-year-olds everywhere is food.
And I forgot that it's peanut butter and ketchup.
Me too.
I remembered the peanut butter part. I forgot the ketchup part, which is so gross.
So
like how would you even have a peanut butter and ketchup sandwich in the first
place?
I
mean, not to yuck anyone's yum, but for the record, for anyone who doesn't know, I don't like vinegar. I can't stand vinegar. I can't do it. Ketchup, main ingredient, vinegar. So I just crossed out the word ketchup and then wrote ew, 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 ew beside it, because no, why are you gonna ruin peanut butter
Also,
like that?
there's something so visceral about choosing the word chunks
Oh
as
God,
that's
you
just
just
makes
made
it
it
even worse.
Yep. Yep.
That's just like sends a shudder down your
Oh
spine of
yeah,
just like, oh, that is so
like the word
gross.
moist. It's just like, we don't need these words.
But just, yeah, chunks of it is so,
Yeah,
it
nourishing.
How
How much sandwich did this girl bring with her too? Because it keeps coming back. Like later, she's gonna drop like another half sandwich in Grover's lap. I'm like, did you come with like 3 and they're all this combination?
It's like she's loaded with sandwich ammo. Well, yeah, just absolutely ready to go.
She didn't bring it to eat it. Maybe that's why. No, honestly. No. Maybe the combo is because she's not planning on eating it. She's planning on throwing it at people and dropping it in their laps. And so she was like, what's the grossest thing I can think of? Again, no offense to anyone who would enjoy this, but no. But no.
Yeah, no.
Absolutely not. Also, okay, so I love... Go ahead. Go ahead. Do the Grover intro.
I was going to say, so then we meet Grover. Our precious baby adult Grover.
No,
I have to remind myself that he's, I think, 20-something technically.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like, I love the misdirect here. Like, I love that we have a protector who is such a hot mess. Like, we love Grover, and yet, like, what is he doing? And like, I just think that juxtaposition is like so charming, is like part of why we love Grover. And this again is like that specific introduction that really paints a picture.
Well, and I feel like if Percy is that, everyone kind of knew that like snarky, very funny kind of middle school kid. I feel like if Percy is that archetype of a middle school kid, Grover is what a lot of other people were, you know, which is the kind of like overwhelmed, everything is just kind of too much all the time. You know, and I also think I do also love like having Grover. I was realizing he's a satyr, so it feels weird to say like a male character, but I guess he's but having, you know, where the second description is he cried when he got frustrated, like having such an emotional like emotionally sensitive character who's a boy, I think is also like an important like representation to have, you know, in books, that like you can be a protector who also 100% cries when you get frustrated, 100%. You know,
and like doesn't have your stuff together, and like but like the thing that he has is the biggest heart ever. Like that is what makes him a good protector. And that is such a nice message for a kid or like anyone to hear, is like, you don't have to be the toughest or like the strongest or the most clever or whatever to like protect other people and stand up for other people. You just need to have a big heart. Sniff, sniff. Also, our first enchilada reference. And so I'm highlighting them because I want to count how many we get.
I noted that as well. I also noted that Percy's saying he must have been held back several grades because he's the only 6th grader with acne and the start of a wispy beard on his chin. I kind of noted that as there's a number of times in this chapter where Percy is trying to make sense of things that are kind of out of place, and this is like a time where he's doing that. But then I also noted that there was no judgment in that. He was just like, oh, he's probably held back a couple grades because he has acne
when he's his best friend,
some facial hair and like, stuff,
you know,
and just that kind of him saying that without judgment, and just kind of also, I think, at the same time, his brain trying to figure out, like, I can tell that there are things that are not adding up and lining up. So what is the way that I can make them make sense?
Which is also very of that age. Because I feel like, you know, you have to make sense of the world around you. You don't always have all the answers. Or you don't always, like, have the same perspective as when you're older. And so you're like, this is how that would make sense. You know?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Kind of like how, can can I call out your who's older, taller thing?
Oh, sure. Yes.
So
yes.
Alisa, as a kid, thought that if you were taller, you were the older sibling, right? And so that if Alisa ever got taller than me, they would be older than me, which I guess now you are by half an inch. I don't know how much older that makes you than me. But like that's such a like perfect way that you would make sense of the world as a little kid is like taller siblings.
Older siblings are taller.
Yeah, older siblings are taller.
So therefore height equals age.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like,
if you are taller, then you are older. Was the conclusion
and that's how it works
that I drew
forever
of the
and ever and always.
Forever and ever.
So it's just like, yeah, it makes sense. So it's like, okay, Grover has some characteristics of an older kid. So he probably is older, but he probably got held back. Like, because you can get held back, which Percy would know because I'm sure he's been like afraid of getting held back and stuff before. Yeah. And so it's like a way to make sense of the world. And then you add, of course, like it's always the magical element that he's having to make sense of. But I love that he's doing it in this like mundane, like we're still, you know, the thing these books do so well and in such a fun way is the war cannon is blowing up a yellow school bus. Like we're bringing the mundane with the magical together. And like so fun.
Yes. And that is almost in general, I feel like part of the magic of this series is bringing the mundane and the magical together, and then I feel like in doing so making the mundane magical.
Totally.
And because those two things are coexisting and then also oftentimes merging, like spoiler alert, Mount Olympus being at the top of the Empire State Building and things like that, you know, turning the Empire State Building into the home of the gods.
Well, and I always think about like when the statues come to life, also very spoiler toward the end, right? But I was in DC in February and I was at the train station and I was looking up at all of these statues of Greek gods and other figures that are there and like imagining them coming to life. And it was so fun. So I think also because it takes place in our reality, it makes you imagine magic in your own world in a very tangible, specific way, which is always really fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Nancy is still throwing wads of sandwich that's getting stuck in Grover's curly brown hair because she can't stop, won't stop with the sandwich, her ammunition pack of sandwiches that she brought to school today. I'm thinking she had like 5 at least. And then again, we get another hyperbole. So like earlier, I kind of mentioned that the stake, you know, talk about like torture, the field tripping torture. We have here, the headmaster had threatened me with death by in-school suspension if anything bad, embarrassing, and mildly entertaining happened on this trip. Also love the use of mildly entertaining, because who doesn't want mildly entertaining?
I know, right. So,
hopefully this podcast is at least mildly entertaining. That's my hope. That's the bar. But I think, you know, death by in-school suspension, like, again, we just have, we have life and death stakes being set up in these very, like, mundane circumstances. And the combination of a little kid feeling like suspension would be the end of the world, like, would be, like, dying of embarrassment or dying of whatever. But then also the stakes are that high in the magical part.
Yes. Well, and not to throw another Harry Potter reference, but we could get killed or worse, expelled.
Exactly.
You know, that there is, I think, a feeling of this would be worse than death if I got expelled from another school.
Well, yeah, in this case, it's like another school. Yeah, totally.
I also wanted to point out in the sentence right before that, where Percy's saying, I knew I couldn't do anything back to her because I was already on probation. That's also where I feel like you get the first hint of Percy fights back. Percy stands up for himself, stands up for his friends.
Totally.
And this piece of Nancy knew that Percy couldn't do anything because he was already on thin ice. And so she was taking full advantage of that.
But that also means she knew that he would have if he wasn't on thin ice.
Exactly.
Yep, totally.
Yep.
I agree.
And that feels like such a great way to kind of learn, without Percy saying, well, I normally, and I would have, you kind of learn like the kind of sinister dynamic of this bully, and then also the fact that
she's
Percy
pretty
is
manipulative
the type of
for a
person,
12-year-old.
very incredibly, but also 12-year-old girl.
No, I know, but she's got the the meta situation on lock. Like she knows what is happening. She's tracking all the interpersonal dynamics. I'm sure that if there was a book about Nancy Bobbitt, we would find her to be a much more sympathetic character, and maybe that's the villain retelling that we all actually need out of Percy Jackson is the Nancy Bobbitt story.
And then we can learn who she became and
what's up with the sandwiches. I mean, there's so many mysteries to unpack here.
You know what I could see? Okay, without derailing us too much, I could see Nancy Bobbitt having the journey, because my brain went down this train of thought of, I feel like she would become a high power CEO who's using all of her manipulative 100%. Tactics for evil. 100%. And then I realized that she could be the star of the classic Christmas movie where said high power CEO, learns the power of love and Christmas and
kind of situation. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. We'll circle back.
So I think Nancy Bobbitt is going to star in a Hallmark Christmas movie where she maybe like returns to or gets stranded. No, I feel like she's not returning to a hometown. She's the version where you get stranded 100%. In like a tiny town, and you kind of learn community and love and all of those things. So that's her future.
Maybe she falls in love with the sandwich maker.
Oh, full circle.
Full circle moment.
Maybe that's it.
At the end, they're
and then she makes peanut butter and ketchup sandwiches.
Sitting at the dock.
But it's peanut butter and ketchup,
God, I hope not. I really hope she did that just to gross people out. Oh, man.
Oh, goodness. Anyways, back to the actual book.
Back to our regularly scheduled programming. I just put a heart next to Grover, and I put, "Aw, Grover," because his answer to calm Percy down is, "It's okay. I like peanut butter." And it's so sweet. And I just feel like that, again, is back to like the way that he diffuses situations is like, the positive reframe of it all. Like, he doesn't say, "I like peanut butter with ketchup in a sandwich." Like, he doesn't lie to Percy.
Right.
But he says,
but he
"I like
the
peanut
one
butter."
thing.
Yeah, the one true thing.
Yeah.
That can like hopefully make Percy feel better. And I just think he's the sweetest.
Well, and even that when he has that reminder of you're already on probation, you'll know who get blamed if anything happens. Like he's kind of reminding Percy, like, Nancy will get away with this. You will be the one to get blamed. Like, that is a moment where I feel like you can see he is being a protector, trying to be like, I might be getting harmed by this person, right? Like she's throwing these sandwiches at me, but I can take it. And he, I think, has the bigger picture in his brain of it's very important that you do not leave the school.
Yeah, totally.
Because there are some other bigger, scarier things happening. You see serious
Grover here. Because like Grover has like, kind of derpy, goofy Grover, and he has like hungry Grover, and he has like silly Grover, and he has like sweet Grover. But like here he's like serious. He's like, no, here's the real deal. This is actually why I'm here. Like, we need to take this seriously. And it really comes through. It's not always, the side of him that you see, but then you're like, oh yeah, he's there for a reason.
Yeah.
And to your point about Nancy, like, she's not throwing the sandwiches at Percy. Like, she's throwing them at Grover because she knows that will actually annoy Percy more than if you threw them at him. Which says a lot about him.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot about her.
And a lot about her. And her CEO.
But yes, also does set up his fatal flaw of him willing to, like, what he's willing to do in order to protect people he loves. His friends. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
And again,
so much set up in chapter 1.
So much, and we're only like halfway through it.
I know. And then we get another lovely, ominous, suspense filled sentence saying in-school suspension would have been nothing compared to the mess I was about to get myself into. So we had another lovely something big, bad, and terrible is about to happen. And then as we're going through the museum tour part, I just wrote next to it blew my mind that this stuff had survived for 2,000, 3,000 years. Or same dude. It still blows my mind.
Totally.
That, pottery and stuff that any pottery that I own feels so fragile, but then that we have pottery and all these other things from so many cultures around the world, thousands and thousands of years ago, still never fails to blow my mind. So that was my
100%.
Same person.
100%. And I think that's part of like what lends the gravitas to all of the humor and the pop culture of the books is that it's grounded in these really ancient traditions and stories and mythologies in the midst of, eventual burrito fights and such. We're grounded in something that's deeper and, archetypes and stories that have been told for thousands of years. I underlined Mrs. Dodds giving the evil eye because I feel like there's just I do think that like her description with the leather jacket and like other things, and you're like, okay, like very, very Hades like from the beginning, but little things like giving the evil eye and having a crooked finger, and she figured I was devil spawn. Like there's just all these like references.
Well, and even this hilarious character description of she looked mean enough to ride a Harley right into your locker. Like that being the descriptor of the type of mean and how mean it just is both so unique and so funny and descriptive to imagine someone just riding a Harley straight into a school locker.
And you still have like, he's a kid in school, so into the locker, like not into something else. So
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And then we kind of get our first hint of the larger forces at work and the mist, which we'd come to Yancy halfway through the year when our last math teacher had a nervous breakdown. That's kind of our first little hint of like
how this works.
There are larger things that can kind of influence and shape
the course of
how things happen, and people can be inserted into your life and where you are,
and everyone will just kind of go along with it. I also like being from Texas, feel like her use of honey in that like threatening way. Like there's so many different ways to say the word honey, and I think like it really comes through where it's she would point her crooked finger at me and say, "Now, honey," real sweet. And I knew I was going to get after school detention for a month.
Well, this was the first time where I think my brain fully processed that she was a little math teacher from Georgia. And I think that was the first time I really went, oh, Georgia. She's like, she's Southern. And I agree, reading Now Honey and all of those how often she used it, I kind of was like, oh, I understand the way in which she's saying honey.
Oh yeah. And then when he tells Grover he doesn't think Mrs. Dodds is fully human, and Grover looks at him real serious and says, "You're absolutely right." And I was like, Grover, there's a couple times through here where I'm like, Grover is terrible at keeping secrets. He's just terrible at it.
I know. I wrote next to it like Grover slipping up, and also it felt like an interesting moment of Grover becoming that like serious Grover, and then also still not being able to keep a secret and not being able to laugh it off and be like, haha, yeah, you're right in a funny way, but instead deadly serious, being like, you 100%. Are 100% correct that she is not human.
It's like, no, come on, dude. Come on, dude. And then I think, oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, you go.
Well, no, just that, well, I was going to go into like the fact that the big bad is about to be set up.
I was about to say the same thing.
Yeah. In like, so I wrote, I love that you introduced the primary villain here, but as an old story. And I put very Disney vibes because I feel like there's this way in which it's like, oh, we're just telling a story, right? And in this case, it's also like a lecture, like a class, like a serious thing. And then like, it's actually the big bad of the whole series. Yes. And I don't think you expect that when you're reading through this the first time.
No, not at all. And even honestly, this was the first time that it really hit me that on literal page 5, we are introduced to Kronos, the big bad of the whole entire series, and that we get Kronos's entire backstory.
Yep.
You know, you are introduced to his whole myth.
Yes.
Here, it makes me wonder how much Rick Riordan like knew what the whole arc
I think he knew.
Was going to be.
I think the way he writes. I think the way he writes, he knows, because he has such puzzle piece writing. I feel like he knows a lot of stuff. I don't know, but I feel like he does.
I don't know. It made me so curious to know, like, when he was writing this book, did he already have the idea in his head? Yeah. That Kronos was going to be, you know, this whole big bad over 5 books. And
I think based on, we'll get to it later. I think based on stuff toward the end of this book, we know that he knows,
Yeah. But yeah, to introduce him.
But I love it in the first chapter and the way that it's done. I think it's very clever. And yet it's like always tinged with that humor and that little kidness of like, the wording of Zeus grew up, he tricked his dad Kronos into barfing up his brothers and sisters. Ew, said one of the girls behind me, you know, and it's like we're interjecting in this way where like it doesn't feel like you're being lectured at and it's exposition and it's being forced down your throat, right? It's like being interacted with by these characters in a very authentic way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what this is me moving on to the next page. Fine. But I did kind of note when Nancy Bobofit was saying like we're going to use this in real life, like it's going to say on our job applications. I like noted, I was like, I don't like you, but I do remember so many times in school wondering how on earth is this going to be applicable in my life.
Like CEO
and
energy.
Then
it's like I only need to know what I need to know. Like, don't tell me extraneous information, people. I have places to be and things to do and sandwiches to throw.
I have a business to run in 20 years. But then it did really. I wish we got what Mr. Brunner, who knows, they do, but I don't know. His explanation for why regular people, like we know why he needs Percy to know and understand, but like what would he say to all the other kids? What would be his kind of takeaway for them around the importance of knowing that story, knowing, everything that he's teaching them?
My guess would be that, the takeaway for all of us, anyone who doesn't identify as a demigod, which of course we would, but anyone reading this who doesn't see themselves in the pages of the story, as Percy says, is like these are these stories that are myths about people have archetypes and lessons and meanings that and themes that like relate to our lives. I'm not sure what the like eating up your kids one. Well, no, you know what? Let me put on my teacher hat.
Okay.
I have a thought.
Yes.
Here's my thought.
Yeah.
My thought is actually that the reason that Kronos does this is because he's threatened by his kids. And so what I would actually say is like this speaks to the heart of competitiveness and even with parenting, like parents who compete with their kids or like don't have their own, lives. And so they're like obsessed with how, their kids are going to be more successful than them. And in this case, it's like an extreme example where the answer is, I shall eat you, which is not like the normal response if you're not a Titan. No. Obvious, I hope. But I think that there is a lesson there for all of us around like the ways in which we're threatened by others and the ways in which we compete with others, and how that comes back to harm us later and is not a healthy way to live.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. We shall not end the serious analysis portion of the episode.
Well, but really quickly to add on to that, when you were saying all of that, it made me think of The Artist's Way, where Julia Cameron talks about that basically there's room enough for everyone. And there's also, I think, kind of a takeaway for Kronos. He's like, oh, there's not room enough for everyone. There's only room enough for me. And if I'm to succeed, they can't exist. When in reality, there's room enough for everyone, and everyone can.
Part of me is remembering that there might have been a prophecy that like Zeus was going to overthrow, like the gods were going to overthrow the Titans.
I think so.
And so the other thing too is like the power of self-fulfilling prophecies. So like you're so afraid of something happening that you actually cause it to happen. And so it's also, I think, around like control and like having to have control over your life. And instead of doing what you want because, back to the Artist's Way, like it's your intuition or it's what your dream is, or it brings you joy, like that it comes from this, I'm scared that this thing is going to happen. It comes out of fear. And then the thing you're afraid of ends up happening anyway. Yep. Okay, and now the serious part is over. And then we hear the end of this story, which is the gods defeated their father, sliced him to pieces with his own scythe, and scattered his remains into Tartarus. And I just love that, like, this is basically the prequel of this story. Like, we are getting told all the way up to even where the big bad is. It's so cool.
No, you're so right. It is basically like a tiny little prequel. It's almost like getting the Star Wars prequels, like 1, 2, and 3 kind of condensed into a little paragraph.
Totally.
If like Luke were kind of describing Darth Vader, giving you a real quick rundown of Darth Vader, you know, just
that won a pod race one time and important details only.
You know, to like to understand why then, you know, he went on to do all of these terrible things.
And then the class drifted off, the girls holding their stomachs, the guys pushing each other around and acting like doofuses. I just wrote classic.
There's so much incredibly accurate middle school.
It's almost like he was a teacher
middle school
of
behavior.
kids.
It's almost like he was around kids to understand how kids are.
It's like almost like that.
But I do think, to his credit, I don't think everyone is able to accurately write, you know,
and it
kids,
doesn't feel like he's judging
and to accurately portray them. No,
like it feels relatable. Not
he's just
like an adult is being like, and then the kids were doofuses. It's like, no, like Percy's saying that.
Yes, yeah. Also, the couple other things I want to point out on this page before we move on is I did love when Grover mutters busted to Nancy after. I love that's his little moment of kind of standing up to her, you know, and being like, you got caught. You got caught.
He's
you
so
know,
satisfied.
Like and then we start getting little hints about, I'm gonna say, Mr. Bruner. He had radar ears. Like, he was the only one who ever caught Nancy saying anything wrong.
So I looked this up.
Yeah.
I googled, do horses have good hearing? Did you?
I think I just figured that.
Okay, so the answer, according to Google, is yes. Horses have excellent hearing. They can hear a wider range of frequencies than humans and are highly sensitive to sounds, especially those at higher frequencies. And their ears are uniquely designed with many muscles that allow them to rotate independently to pinpoint the direction of sounds. Isn't that interesting? Fun facts.
That's so fun.
Fun facts.
But it's so fun to read those little clues and hints, you know, that are before the reveal of he's a centaur.
Yep. And again, it's like Percy's noticing this, but he's not He doesn't know why, but he's very observant.
Right.
Like, he's always picking up what's going on around him. He's like, Mr. Brenner's the only one who's ever doing this. The other teachers aren't, you know, and he sees it, and he's really paying attention.
Yeah. Also, the his disappointment at Percy not knowing, I was just like, oh God, you don't want to disappoint him.
Yeah, it's like a gut punch.
I was like, that's that disappointment.
He's your favorite teacher.
That just is brutal. And then I also I couldn't help but wonder, in reading the sentence about the gods having been living and growing up completely undigested in Kronos' stomach, I just couldn't help but wonder, like, how do you not notice that you have, what, 11, how many would it have been? No, because it wasn't the full number of them, but multiple fully grown beings inside your stomach.
But I don't know what Titan anatomy is like. You know, it's probably different than human anatomy. But
it just, I had a moment of going down a rabbit hole and wondering
what that was like. Like, did they each pick a spot in the stomach that was their spot? Like, Zeus is like, this is the highest point, so I'm going to sit at this part.
Or
like,
they're just kind of always,
they're always elbowing, sliding down to the bottom because of gravity. Like, I want to know. You know, did they have their powers in there? Like, is Poseidon bending like acid? You know, I don't know. So that's also a little vignette series that we need. It's just like the gods in the tummy.
Gosh, stories from inside Kronos' stomach.
Stories from the inside.
That would be stories from I feel like there's a play on Underworld. I can't think of it right now, but for its stomach, you know. Stories from the Underbelly. There's a good play on words there.
Nice.
Somewhere.
We'll find it.
My brain Oh, and then going to the next page, kind of coming back to how wonderful the character descriptions are of he had this look that wouldn't let you go, intense brown eyes that could have been 1,000 years old and had seen everything.
And I wrote, because they have.
I know, me too.
Are.
It's such a great both kind of like hint to they have seen 1,000 years, you know, he has seen everything, and also is so evocative, like you can picture those brown eyes, you know.
And when you add them to all the other character descriptions before, it just like really rounds him out as a character.
Yeah.
And then I think Percy's reaction to, you know, how like the standard that he's setting is that like I wanted to get angry, this guy pushed me so hard. Like, I think that's just it's such a natural reaction, and I think it's just shows the complexity of emotion, which I really appreciate, where Percy's like, I really like you as a teacher, like you're a great teacher, you're the only person I really enjoy as a teacher, and also I like that you're believing in me, but when you believe in me too hard, it makes me angry because I've had all of these experiences that make me doubt myself or make me not believe in what I'm capable of or make me feel like a screw up. And so like, how dare you put so much pressure on me? And it's like, I just think it's really cool that he can have so many different emotions about this person who is like a mentor to him.
Absolutely. Well, and I also think, kind of going back to that theme of intuition that Percy's kind of like struggling to, like, he has his own sense of intuition about what's happening, but doesn't fully know everything yet. Like, I think he's picking up on, he's pushing me more than the other students. He's expecting more of me. I am being treated differently.
Because he says he didn't expect me to be as good. He expected me to be better. And I don't think anyone else, I mean, when you're a kid who's constantly getting in trouble, people don't expect things of you in that way. Right. I don't think anyone else is expecting him to be as good as other kids or like much less better.
Yeah. And I think Percy's picking up, at least it felt to me in this read of it, that Percy was picking up on there's something else going on here. Yeah. Almost as to why. Because why else would he be expecting so much from me, you know, when he doesn't hold every other student in the class to that exact same standard.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And then as we're getting into the next page, It just everything. Go ahead.
I just really quickly want to say that description of his class and like wearing a suit of Roman armor and challenging him at the board was just another moment where I went, God, I want to be in that class so bad. The funnest
class ever.
It's like my ideal class. And then I also want to point out that on this page is the first time that it's mentioned that Percy has dyslexia and ADHD.
True.
So it's the first time we learn that about him.
Yes, true. Which is such an important part of the book.
That's introduced. Yes, yeah. So that's introduced on this page.
Yeah, 100%. And then it goes on to be explained in multiple ways, which I really like. Anne was like the reason this book was written too, which I really love.
Yeah.
I just like don't think the parts about the steal about the young girl's funeral in the description earlier. We kind of passed through that, but you know that it was about this little girl's funeral and that Mr. Brunner is looking at the steal like he'd been at her funeral, and that just like hit me really hard this time around, where I was just like he was definitely at her funeral. And then knowing all the kids he's interacting with in these books and like how many heroes he's trained and how many of them have died young or been turned into pine trees young or like whatever happens to them young, like it must be so sad, like so difficult. I think as a kid I was like, I want to live forever, and it's just like when you live for 1,000 years and you spend the whole time training heroes who are constantly in perilous situations, you know, there's a lot of grief and loss that comes with that.
And I also think it speaks to how incredible he is as a character, that you see that grief in him, you know that it's there, and he is also still fully capable of believing in every new kid that he trains.
And he's already pushing Percy hard.
He's not kind of clouded by like cynicism. He's not retreating because he's seen so many young heroes die. He's both able to hold that grief and also continue to be incredibly invested and like see every kid not as the faces of everyone else who has passed away, but as their own individual kid, and find his way of believing in them and encouraging them and supporting them. And I think that's really beautiful.
That's a big deal. I agree.
Yeah. And then for some light humor, I figured maybe it was global warming or something.
About the storm brewing. Apocalyptic humor.
Absolutely cracked me up. That it was like, oh yeah, all these weird storms that are happening that he doesn't know it's because of the gods. He's like, it's probably global warming or something.
I was just like, underlined it because I was like, the only god we've been introduced to so far is Zeus in the story earlier. And then this is Zeus. And so I think it's like really, really fun. It's like, first of all, Zeus is unhappy in this current moment. And we don't know why yet, but like the fact that he is and the reason that he is A, the title of the book, and B, just like a very important part of the series. And so I feel like I love that we're starting to get every piece of the puzzle, like we talked about, like in this chapter. And I love it, like you said earlier, when you reread a book and then you're like, I know what that is, and the first time you didn't know what that was. But it's ominous either way.
Oh, very. Yes. And I also found it interesting when he says nobody else seemed to notice. And it kind of made me wonder, I was like, oh, the mist must be working to some extent to either make the storm look less bad or not really show it because it's kind of purely like Zeus. But I found it was very interesting because it's all weather related stuff, but the mist clearly still seems to be working to try and disguise it
because of the cause of the weather. And even when it says I wouldn't have been surprised if this was a hurricane blowing in, I think it's really fun to be like I'm pretty sure right now what's happening is Zeus, but like it's fun that it's like, is it Zeus, is it Poseidon, they're both angry, what's going on? Like even when you're rereading it, it's a little bit of a mystery, or it could be.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, and then again, the food. some of the guys were pelting pigeons with Lunchables crackers. I'm like, first of all, why aren't you eating the crackers? Those are yum. Second of all, like, gosh, just the constant food throwing in this school is ridiculous.
And then we get that little description of Nancy trying to pickpocket something, you know, from, and Mrs. Dodds isn't noticing a thing.
Not a thing. Till later when she's coming. She's coming. And then I love that Percy's like nod and get detention. You know, like he's like not from Brunner. Like, you know, I think he, you know, he feels pushed hard by him, but he knows he's not going to be unreasonably punished by him the way he is with Mrs. Dodds. And I think that's just part of like the trust that they've built and like part of him being a good teacher. And then I love this, like, Grover didn't say anything for a while. Then, when I thought he was going to give me some deep philosophical comment to make me feel better, he said, "Can I have your apple?" I just wrote lol. And I think that's so, again, this is hungry Grover. This is not serious Grover.
Yes. Also very much, it felt like kind of a moment of like, okay, Grover's back into playing, like, I'm playing a teenage or preteen boy.
Is he playing?
You know, who's...
I think this is just who he is. Playing in big air quotes.
That yes, in big air quotes. But it just felt like such a preteen boy thing to do, you know, is to kind of be like, oh, I've been confronted with this big thing that my friend has just said. I wish she would lay off me sometimes, and, you know, kind of stuff. And then she goes, "Can I have your apple? Because I don't really have anything to say."
And I'm hungry forever.
Yeah. And then on the next page, we get our first bit of Sally.
We get Sally. We don't get her name yet, but we do get to learn about Sally Jackson. And I put a little medal on the side with an SJ in it and put Best Mom Award.
I was about to say, I think probably one of the best moms, I mean, in ever, but also just in ever. Like, in books and, you know, like in media, I think she is one of the best moms.
Yeah, and I like it because a lot of books for this age, you know, a lot of the struggle comes from whoever's raising the character, which is totally valid, very relatable. And of course, a lot of these kids are struggling with their parents. Like, there are a lot of kids that have pretty terrible parents in this book series. But I like that Percy has a strong foundation and a good parent. And it serves as like just this grounding place that you can come back to. Because even though Camp Half-Blood is like a home and fun and has a certain amount of like safety and community and all that, it's still part of a dangerous world. And so in this case, him having someone in the real world who is like safety to him, I think works really well.
Yeah, and I also think I really think you learn and get a very real sense of how much, because of Sally Jackson being who she is, that's also why Percy is
totally
who
that's like why he's
like
a good kid.
His capacity, like his capacity to love, his capacity to care,
stand up for other people,
his kind of view on life. All of that comes from her. And I think it is so lovely that when his kind of like literal existence in the world is a constant threat and danger, that he's able to have this constant, permanent, safe place in his mom.
100%.
You know, and I think that's such a lovely thing to have, both for the character but then also as a reader.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, reading that, like reading Sally Jackson as a mom is just some of my favorite bits, because she's such a beautiful character. Yeah, she's so cozy, and you also get so much with not a whole lot, you know, like she's in the books, but she's not in, not all that much, but you really just, she kind of shines off the page. Like, she's so
like, she feels magical, but she's not magical, and so she makes you think of people in real life you've met who have a magic to them, like in Encanto, the mom, I think, can like heal people with her food, and it's like that's how Sally Jackson feels. but like she's not magical. And I think that there's something always really cool about characters like that who have a very human type of magic that isn't extraordinary, but it feels extraordinary in your life. Yeah. Also, I think she sets up the ability for Percy to have deep, meaningful relationships with other people. Like with Mr. Brunner, like I don't think that Percy would be so attached to him or have such an affection for him, react in the same way. Like in this part, we hear about how, you know, Percy just wants to jump in a taxi and head home to his mom. She'd hug me and be glad to see me, but she'd be disappointed too. And I wouldn't be able to stand that sad look she'd give me. And I just thought, like, I think that he can be affected by Mr. Brunner's expectations or disappointments in him, partly because he actually has someone in his life who's like worth caring about as a parent in a way that he would be affected by her disappointment. And that gives him the ability to have these connections with other people too.
Well, and even in that same part, he says she'd send me right back to Yancey, remind me that I had to try harder. And I think there is this parallel of being raised by a mom who you can tell fundamentally believes in him and knows what he's capable of, and so pushes him to like become what he can be capable of becoming. That then I think that also is why he's able to, with Mr. Brunner, feel he has maybe that frustration, that anger, but he also recognizes what it is because he has, you know, this example of basically both of these two people believing in him to an incredible degree, and so therefore pushing him to do things that maybe he doesn't want to do, or like he wishes he could just come home because that would make him, you know, feel better and feel like, okay, this is like the thing that feels maybe in a way like easier than kind of sticking it through and seeing, okay, I can face this, I can tackle this, really I can.
Well, and like she'd hug me and she'd send me right back. Like I think that combination. And the thing from Sally's perspective that you have to think about is like Sally knows that Percy is constantly in danger, and yet she believes in him enough and loves him enough and wants him to have like success and education and things enough to send him out into this very dangerous world that she knows more than he does how dangerous it is. And like she does it anyway, but she makes a safe place for him to come back.
Right. Yeah, she doesn't keep him cooped up and therefore believing that he's not capable of taking care of himself because she's and facing like scared challenges.
Because as any parent should be, is like, if you know your kid would be in danger, you would be scared for them, and it would be a very natural reaction to like, keep them close that way. But she sends him out into the world to like prove himself, and that's also like what Greek heroes do, and I think she knows that. You know?
Yes. And then I just kind of laughed at the description of Mr. Brunner with the red umbrella and that making it look like he was in a motorized cafe table.
Also, though, another horse reference because he's eating celery, which is just crunchy water. But, you know, I think horses love it.
And then another incredible description with Nancy. Her freckles were orange as if somebody had spray painted her face with liquid Cheetos. Just these choices, you know, of how to describe things are so incredible and so fun and so specific. Vivid.
Yep. And then even though we've thrown so much sandwich, we're still able to dump half-eaten lunch in Grover's lap.
Yep.
So that's special. And then Percy Jackson coming in strong.
The moment we've all been waiting for.
So I do love that we get the school counselor telling him to count to 10. Because, you know, always works. Never fails to work counting to 10 when you're angry.
My note was like, not really great regulation technique. Like, Not actually a helpful
Not
thing.
actually, but a wave roared in my ears and I wrote, Poseidon, baby, let's go.
Also, I was so mad my mind went blank. It also felt, to me, that stood out this time around, of it felt like because he's not really aware, it's that his mind goes blank and something happens. So that's why he's not able to piece together, like, I caused the wave and I caused it to grab her and throw her in, you know, the fountain. So yeah, that really like stood out to me.
Yeah, he kind of has this like out of body experience. And then Mrs. Dodds materialized next to us. I feel like we keep getting these little hints of like, you know, you could be like, oh, it's just Percy not tracking things, which he'll kind of say later, but it's like, no, magic. No, magic is happening.
Yeah. And then I love that we get the snippets on the next page of the other kids. Like the water, it grabbed her. Like they kind of saw a little bit, you know,
the mist didn't cover that up
of what happened. No. And then I loved the description of for Mrs. Dodds, there was a triumphant fire in her eyes, as if I'd done something she'd been waiting for all semester. Just felt so. That is like both an Easter egg or like a hint to, you know, like the larger kind of plot at work. But then also the description of a triumphant fire in her eyes is such an incredible description. But yeah, as if I'd done something she'd been waiting for all semester is just, in rereading it, you're like, you know that she has been waiting.
And again, like Percy's intuition is spot on here. Like he's like, you're, you know, like when you have someone and you're like, they're out to get me, like whether it's your teacher or some kid or something, and you're like, no, like they specifically don't like me, and somebody will be like, no, like you're imagining it or whatever, and it's like, no, like they really don't like me, they like really, me specifically, like it's not it's not who they are. And this is like he's right, she is there specifically and only and uniquely for him. For him.
And has been waiting this whole semester for a moment like this to happen.
And then Grover just throwing himself in front of the firing squad,
just trying so hard.
Take me instead. He says, wait, it was me, I pushed her, which is hilarious.
And she's
no one's buying that.
She's buying none of it. No,
Grover, I'm sorry.
No. Yeah. But and then also she glared at him so hard his whiskery chin trembled. I know. And then I love so when, you know, Mrs. Dodds is telling him to come with her and Nancy Bobofit smirks at him, that Percy gave her my deluxe I'll kill you later stare.
I know. I underlined that too. I feel like that's so like, when you're like, you can imagine being young and like having like intense feelings and intense faces you give people, and like, but then I could picture like being an adult and watching kids interact. Like you have such a different, it's almost like an Ant-Man when like you go between like the regular size and then you're down to like the size where the toy train feels like a real train. Like it's that perspective shift. I was like going back and forth, and I feel like it's just so fun. Again, he's like capturing how you really feel.
And the kind of funny thing that my brain thought of was the adding that it being a deluxe version. I was like, so he's got a regular, he's got a deluxe, he's, you know, he's got the variations of I'll kill you later.
And that's like, again, you know, part of that like constant, there's always commentary, there's always snark, there's always an angle. Like Percy always brings something unique to the table and how he's describing the world around him in that way. And then here's where he talks about the way in which he's relating the idea of ADHD to misinterpreting time, which relatable. But like,
well, I was going to ask, is that the note that I put on that paragraph is that an actual ADHD thing to have those kind of like gaps?
Yeah, for sure.
Almost.
Well, and I think too, just like misjudging time, like you have seen me be late a lot in life. And it's like, it's not like I'm like, I would love to be late today. I want to be running behind. I want to not make the call at the right time. You know, like that's not, you know, there's a way in which you either are like almost procrastinating till the last minute, I feel like, or like you're like, oh, I totally lost track of time. And so this feels like a very, I don't know if I've ever like didn't realize someone had walked really far away from me in 2 seconds, you know, like maybe. But I think this is like a sort of like minutia moment of it. And obviously in this case too, it's like, no, actually she's just magic.
Right. She literally did transport herself. It's another one of those moments where a magical thing happened and he's trying to make sense of it with what he knows, and he's going, okay, I know I have ADHD and I miss some stuff, so I must have just missed her. But he does have that question of how'd she get there so fast? Like he still has that intuition of like, okay, I know I miss things, but I don't think I miss enough that I would have completely missed her.
He still
going
wants
all the
to
way
trust
upstairs.
himself. Right? Like he still wants to trust that he is accurately perceiving things, but it's really hard to do that in this case. And we will get an explanation later of like the ADHD is the hardwiring for battle situations and like things like monsters who can teleport and stuff. Like it's helpful to be able to like track in that way. But yeah, for sure. Like having, you know, gaps in time is relatable content for sure.
And I found it so interesting that Grover is kind of looking at
I
Mr.
thought
Bruner
this too.
and Percy. He's like not getting up. He's not going to say anything. So it made me wonder, like, does he go up to say something to him after Percy has entered the building? And if so, like, why is he waiting until Percy enters the building? Maybe it's because he doesn't want Mrs. Dodds to see that he's kind of clued into what's happening.
I was wondering that too. I also didn't know though, like how much Grover's allowed to interfere or intervene, or like, you know, Percy's supposed to be able to do things on his own. Like I was curious about that too. And later it really does feel like Mr. Brenner's like, here I'm like, okay, he's not paying attention, but later I'm like, I think he was, you know what I mean? Yeah, I don't know that it's that Grover went over to him. Like, I feel like he's even right now tracking. He's just not showing that he's tracking, you know, because I do think he wants Percy to like stand up on his own to things.
Yeah, and there might be, to your point, because I can't remember what we kind of learned rules wise later on, but I'm sure there might be some kind of restrictions around like when you can, if they don't know that they are a demigod, like when can you kind of start to intervene in moments versus when do you, because maybe he was wondering like, do I just let this lie? Is she just maybe going to, you know, yell at him and give him detention, or is this a moment
because Percy's been in trouble with her before, and so calling more attention could put Percy in more danger in particular situations for sure. I also like that Percy's like, okay, she's gonna make me buy a new shirt for Nancy at the gift shop. I'm like, if only, Percy Jackson, if only.
I know
so naive.
And then we start to get her like the weird noise in her throat, almost like growling. We get her transformation. I loved the even without the noise, I would have been nervous. It's weird being alone with the teacher.
I like that too. Because it is.
It is weird, you know? It's like that feeling if you see a teacher outside of school, you feel
like, you
weird.
You don't exist outside of your classroom. You just live there.
Or if you're like held back to talk to them alone, you're like, this is weird. Like I only see you in the context of a room full of other students. Like
totally.
Yeah.
And then she looks at the freeze as if she wants to pulverize it. I'm like, did she know the girl too? And like, did they have battles? Like, I need this whole backstory. So
I know. Okay. Adding to the list of the other backstories we need the backstory of this girl.
Well, I kind of want to look for her in my Greek mythology book and see who it could be.
Oh yeah. And then go to the next page. The thing that really stood out to me was that she says, Mrs. Dodd says, us, and you've been giving us problems. That she immediately switches to that.
Like now that she's seen
plural.
him use his powers, She's like, there is no more pretending. Gloves are off. Talons are out. And so I underlined it and put the Furies.
Yep.
We don't know that yet. And then I love that, like, the leather jacket is going to make sense as we see her transform. I think that is really, really cool.
Yep. Yeah. I also just it stood out to me the fact that Percy says yes ma'am.
I know.
And
Same.
it was so funny of like he's so disrespectful towards authority figures. But in this one moment when he knows he's really in trouble, he's kind of like, okay, I think I'll try a yes ma'am to see
self-preservation
if this makes anything
and
better.
like it's to the woman from Georgia. So I feel like
yep.
And then I love to she's a teacher, I thought nervously. It's not like she's going to hurt me. I just wrote nope.
Yep.
Like completely wrong.
Yep, fully and completely wrong. And then she keeps on talking in wheeze, which I just love that she's kind of dropped all the pretense. You know, she's like, I've seen you use your powers, we're not gonna play.
We're not joking around.
And then he's still trying to make sense of it. So he's like, maybe she found out about my illegal stash of candy. And then I got my essay on Tom Sawyer from the internet. I was just like, we are in 2005 calling it the internet.
Also, I was thinking now it would be like AI wrote my essay.
Right. Yes.
Like a very different context.
Wrote my essay.
Yeah, exactly. That we're in now.
And then you kind of pointing out the hyperboles, him saying, or worse, they were going to make me read the book as like his worst form of punishment.
And then he comes again with the ma'am, I don't.
I know, he's still trying.
Time is up, she hissed. It's like, she is fully...
And then the description of her transformation is incredible.
Agreed.
It's really incredible. Her eyes begin to glow like barbecue coals, her fingers stretching, the jacket melting into large leathery wings.
I love that line.
It's just like, it's so, and again, it's a short description.
Yeah.
Like it's only a couple of sentences, but you just
get tells you everything. And she was a shriveled hag with bat wings and claws and a mouthful of yellow fangs. And she was about to slice me to ribbons, which I feel like is also such a great line and a great image. And he's right. Yep. And then things got even stranger, as if like this wasn't already completely strange. And I wrote, so he was paying attention because Mr. Brunner is here with the assist.
Yep, holding a pen.
A pen.
I just put an exclamation point next to that. And I loved that what he says is, what ho,
Me too.
Percy, which is what we learned he said when he's like dressed in the full armor and kind of challenging them with the swords.
So
like I felt like he kind of knew that would get Percy
into I gotta write the answer on
like
the board.
A sword's about to come my way. Like I've gotta.
That's true. This whole time he's just been probably preparing him for this moment.
Yeah. Like a Pavlovian response to when you hear what ho, you get ready to fight.
Exactly. And then it's just like so classic, the pen to sword combo.
The pen to sword, we get Anna Klusmos, its first moment.
So exciting.
In our story. And the reveal that it's the sword that he always used on tournament day.
It makes it like so sweet that becomes Percy's sword.
Yeah. And also kind of heartbreaking because the sword is such a heartbreaking story.
I know.
And that Mr. Brunner was like using it every day in this like fun kind of classroom. It's like, man, the life that the sword has had is,
oh my gosh, the things the sword has seen.
Incredible. Truly.
And I like that Percy says, my knees were jelly. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the sword. And I just felt like it's really, it feels real that he would be afraid. And I like that as a hero on this hero's journey, he's not fearless at the beginning. He's not just like amazing at fighting off the bat. Like he does have an affinity for sword fighting, and we learned that later. But like in this moment where his world has turned completely upside down, the veil is like literally being pulled from his eyes. he has this really natural reaction of being scared. And I really like that.
Mm-hmm. No, I loved that too. I wrote next to it as it would be in real life because that felt so genuine of this is still a 12-year-old boy, you know, who's seeing this terrifying monster, is deeply confused as to what is happening.
Like his life is literally in peril.
Yes. He knows that, okay, I could die right now in this moment. And yeah, I love the fact that he's not then just immediately like, and I brandish the sword and,
I knew what to do.
Through me.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
He's like, no, my entire body is shaking because this is a deeply terrifying
as
moment.
it should be. And then best line ever, die, honey.
Yep.
Love it. I love it. The honey.
Love that she's still even
never
in
dropping the
form.
act. Like
She's
it makes
still
you think that
Georgian
she's
woman.
down in the underworld. Like just constant Georgia accent vibes. Like that's just who she is.
Yep.
She did a stint in Georgia sometime for Hades, and just she never dropped it.
Yeah. But then I also liked that while he's like so deeply scared, that those kind of instincts that we learn later on that are kind of like innate to being a demigod, like the phrasing of I did the only thing that came naturally, I swung the sword, is both like, okay, yeah, something comes at you, anyone kind of in that self-defense would, if you have a sword, you're going to be swinging it. Like that, but then also the kind of other side of it of he's a demigod and he doesn't know it, and swinging a sword is actually an incredibly natural thing for him to be doing.
And like I feel like in a lot of other circumstances in the future, just doing that wouldn't do the trick, right? And I was thinking about how in this case Mrs. Dawes is also underestimating him. Because like we have all these other adults that are like believing in him and like know all these good things about him. She's totally underestimating him and thinking that she's just gonna like easily wipe him out, even with the assist from Mr. Brenner. Which also interesting, like she doesn't seem worried that Mr. Brenner's gonna interfere. Which is kinda interesting.
No, not at all.
But it just goes through her shoulder, as if she were made of water with a hiss.
I love the description of hiss. Again, with just these like incredibly succinct ways of creating such evocative
like specific
imagery as the reader. It's and then the description of Mrs. Dodds was a sand castle in a power fan. So like good. Just those choices of how to describe that she turns to dust and what happens to that dust, you know, like a sand castle in a power fan. There's so many ways that you could say it, but that is so specific and so unique, and also so unique to Percy.
Yeah.
You know,
how
that feels like that is
things.
Percy's way of describing it.
And yeah, we get our first yellow powder.
Exploded. Yep, our first yellow powder, leaving nothing but the smell of sulfur and a dying screech and a chill of evil in the air.
As if those two glowing red eyes were still watching me. I love that end part.
Because it also, that is kind of a fun, like, almost in a way nod to the way that monsters never really die, you know, and that they're all like they're going to be coming back around, and they're going to have their eyes on you still because you were the one who killed them, so they're going to be still be watching their revenge.
I also wrote first monster kill. Like this is Percy's first confirmed kill in the book, which is kind of wild. So I kind of want to see like in this book even, you know, how many monsters does he kill? And something that's interesting here, I don't know if it's just like a continuity thing or if it makes sense for like where he's at with not knowing in the mist and stuff, but at the end he's alone and there's just a ballpoint pen in his hand, and normally he has to put the cap on to turn it back into a pen. So I was like, is it because of the mist? Is it just like continuity error in writing? Like, why is it a ballpoint pen?
I know. I had that exact same question and thought, and I wondered if it was maybe because since even though Mrs. Dodds revealed herself, the world has not, like he does not know that gods still exist.
He doesn't know his identity as a demigod.
Right. And so I kind of interpreted that as, okay, I think the mist must still be working over him to some extent for it to, for it to be this kind of like, and in a second, everything kind of resets and it's just a pen again and Mr. Bruner's gone.
Yeah.
And there's not really any evidence of what happened.
I thought that was
the
really
world just
interesting. I don't know if I'd
gaslight
noticed that before.
Percy. Yeah. I don't know. I had it stood out to me this time around as well. And I also didn't know if I had really caught that before.
He didn't do an action.
He doesn't cap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then his hands are still trembling, which I love. But then he says,
and he's still
trying to make it make
come
sense.
up with an explanation.
My lunch.
And he's saying my lunch must have been contaminated with magic mushrooms or something. Like he's still like, okay,
I'm also like, why does Percy know
her?
about magic mushrooms? Like, I don't think you're old enough, like, come on. But I think it's like, yeah, it's relatable. Like he's trembling because he was scared. Like he did the thing, he swung the sword, but like that didn't automatically make him like 100% brave and unbothered by the situation. Right. And then also, he's just like, something must be off in some way. Like, what happened? What happened? And then it has started to rain because we had a storm earlier.
And then we discover how the mist works without knowing that it's the mist, with Nancy Boba Fett saying, I hope Mrs. Kerr whipped your butt. And both as the reader and as Percy, you're going, who on earth is Mrs. Kerr? Who are you talking about? And Grover not being the best liar. Again, not good at keeping secrets. Not
just so bad at it. Just so bad at it.
He does not do a very good job at kind of like, assuaging Percy and making him be like, oh, okay, no, Mrs. Dodds never existed. Though I did write next to that, just like gaslighting. So much gaslighting. So much.
I just wrote Grover's so bad at keeping secrets. Because I'm like, come on, my friend. Like, you have one job. You have one job. Keep the secret. That's your one job.
You have one job. And you're not doing a very good job
but we love you.
Yes.
And then Thunder again. So I wrote Zeus baby again with a Thunderbolt. Because it's fun to it's just so fun to know that there's these bigger forces at work. And it feels very innocuous for it to be like thunder is booming, right? It's like, okay, that's just the weather. Right. Like not in every book. Yeah. Rain doesn't always mean like a god is mad. But like in this book, rain and thunder means God is mad. Zeus.
Yeah, it means Zeus
is very unhappy right now. And so I just think, it's just cool to have that be in here when we don't even know yet.
Yeah. And then the ending of this chapter.
Yes. Well, wait, can we talk about the gaslighting first?
Oh,
yes. I'm sorry. Yes. I'm sorry. But this man, who otherwise is a fantastic teacher and person. Yeah. That would be my pen. Please bring your own writing utensil in the future, Mr. Jackson.
Yep.
Bro. Come on. Come on. Yeah, like, because it's like gaslighting in the way that it's like, not just you imagined a thing and that never happened. It's you also messed up. Like, you did something wrong. Yeah. Like, no, that was an unnecessary level of gaslighting. We did not need that. You have otherwise been a great person, but I do not support this.
Well, and then, but then he also ends on the absolutely massive gaslighting of Percy. There is no Mrs. Dodds on this trip. As far as I know, there has never been a Mrs. Dodds ENC Academy. Are you feeling all right? Being like, are you okay?
Are you okay?
Like, are you getting a little sick or something?
Did you have some magic mushrooms in your sandwich for lunch?
Yeah.
So we end on the gaslighting, and also from a writing perspective, it's a great hook to keep you going. Because you incredible. Also are, like we talked about at the beginning, very invested in Percy Jackson at this point.
Absolutely.
You have seen what he has seen through his eyes. And also by this point, I have completely forgotten that at the beginning he was talking to me and I was experiencing this as something that already happened to him. Like at this point, at the end of the chapter, I'm in the moment with him, which I think is like really cool. But we're over here we feel crazy too. Like, as the reader, you're like, what? And, you know, Mr. Brunner has been set up as like a very reliable, you know, adult.
Trustworthy.
And so to have him then be gaslighting is it's kind of like a betrayal at this point.
Well, and I think adds to, especially in the experience of the first time reading it, this confusion and suspense and this feeling of like, okay, I just went through this battle, but then now I'm learning that everyone's saying that Mrs. Dodds doesn't exist, and it's, you know, this Mrs. Kerr, and it leaves you as the reader with this like, I have to get to the next page to figure out what on earth is happening and why everyone's acting like this teacher who not only existed for this whole previous chapter, but I also have this whole history with, where I have said as Percy, like, this woman hates me and has been so horribly mean to me, and I have this history of, you know, Mrs. Dodds treating me this way. Like, it's not just the experience of this chapter, it's the experience of, you know, the character going back months to then be told, this person does not exist.
Well, and
what
not
are you
just
talking
that,
about? It's
but
like,
this person that you just killed, like, from Percy's perspective, like, he just killed his math teacher. Like, that's the title. I accidentally vaporize, you know, and it's vaporizing, so it's a confusing type of killing for someone who's like in the normal world still so far. But like, that must be trippy in your mind to be like, what did I just do? And instead of being able to process, like, I just hurt someone, I think, who was trying to hurt me, I think, like, she was trying to kill me and threatening me, and there's other people, like, instead of that, it's like, no, that didn't happen, actually. You're wrong. This person that you just killed, like, never even existed. And also, you should really remember to bring a pen.
Right. And also, are you feeling
are you okay?
I think you might. Yeah, I think maybe you're not,
seems
because
a little off with you. Your aura
saying
is just all kinds of messed up right now. Like, what's going on? And that brings us to the end of chapter 1.
It does.
Ta-da! Exciting.
The only other thing that I noticed was both Grover and Mr. Brunner are characters who use disability to cover up the fact that they are magical and like not human. And I found that very interesting as like, because I was kind of taking note of all the different types of people you're introduced to, and it's like, we meet a character who uses a wheelchair incredibly early on, and the explanation for Grover is that he's got, what did they say, a type of muscular disease in his legs, which are all things that actual real human beings you know could have. But I found it so interesting that it's then also used as kind of like a, so don't notice anything different, you know,
I think
about me. Like, I'm going to cover up that I'm a centaur, and I'm going to cover up that I'm a satyr.
My curiosity would be, like, for people who have that experience, is it similar to when you have dyslexia or ADHD and you're reading this and you're like, oh, like, this is a cool way to think about, like, what this could be? Like, the ADHD and the dyslexia is sort of turned into like a positive thing, like a part of your identity that's core to, like, really cool things about you. It's like, does it feel like that, or does it not feel like that? Like, that would be, I don't know, but like, that would be my curiosity.
I had the same question when I was reading it, because I think this was the first time my brain really fully processed that fact of like, oh, the two magical characters that we're introduced to, like, I mean, apart from Mrs. Dodds, it seems like she's just kind of doing like full transformation. But the two characters of this magical world that we're introduced to are kind of, using these human disabilities as a way to say, I am also human. I am not something that is magical. So I was very curious to know what actually disabled people, how they feel about kind of that being the way that Grover and Mr. Brunner navigate the human non-magical world.
As they say, let us know in the comments.
Yes, let us know.
Any other closing final thoughts about this chapter? I feel like we did some sort of summary thoughts at the beginning.
Yeah. I feel like we I feel like we kind of hit most of my summary thoughts at the beginning. This chapter leaves off with just quite the cliffhanger. And you just really want to know what happens next. I'm really excited
for next episode. Like, I really wanted to turn the page and keep reading, and I didn't. And I was very proud of myself. But
I know.
I really wanted to. So I'm excited for the next one. And also, you know, going into this, I was like, these are such tiny little chapters. Like, I don't know, we're going to have like half-hour episodes, and we are almost at 2 hours. So I'm no longer worried about that.
At 1:45 and went, okay.
I think this is why we decided we could, in fact, do a podcast. So thank you, everyone, for listening to the inaugural episode of the Percy-Verse Podcast. We're glad you're here, and we are excited to keep diving in to Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the Lightning Thief.